Welcome to the Coaching Edge podcast with your co-hosts, Dr. Steve Jeffs and Erwin de Grave. Each episode, we bring you expert guests and transformative coaching insights. Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Coaching Edge podcast. My name is Erwin de Grave. I'm here together with Steve Jeffs and our guest today, Jennifer Britton. Good morning, or good afternoon, or hello, wherever you are around the world. So a little bit about Jennifer. Jennifer is the author, coach, talk leader, a really expert in group and team coaching, virtual events. So maybe Jennifer, why not tell a little bit more about yourself to everyone?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be with both of you, coming at you from early morning, a couple hours north of Toronto, Canada, where I get to live on a beautiful lake. Water anchors my work everywhere I am in the world. I work out of 3 locations now throughout the year, and passionate about this topic today in 2025 as much as I was when I opened the doors to Potentials Realized on April 1st, which is April Fool's Day, 2004. When I returned back to Canada from the Caribbean, which is interestingly like a closed loop now. So yeah, really looking forward to our conversation. I think, as you said, we'll go into the landscape of group coaching, team coaching, virtual events. If people haven't met me before physically, they probably heard me through my writing. So I wrote the world's first book called Effective Group Coaching back in 2009. So we celebrate 15 years this year of that book.
Good.
Oh, wow, you have the copy. I love it. Okay, fantastic. And since then, a lot of people think that's my only book. I've actually published 7 books. So there was Effective Group Coaching, then From One to Many Best Practices for Group and Team Coaching, also important, I think, in today's world of team and group coaching. And then in 2017, I took a third proposal to my publisher and I said, hey, I want to do this book called Effective Virtual Conversations. And they were like, we're not really interested in virtual. We don't think there's any relevance in the world. I was like, well, I guess I need to set up my own publishing company. So in 2017, out came Effective Virtual Conversations. It was popular, but became very popular in 2020 when 6 billion people went virtual, remote, and hybrid. So my passion is really working with organizations, with teams, with entrepreneurs to affect change, because I used to work for the UN in affecting world change, and in this business we knew to do no different, but it's really through conversations. So we get to work with a wide range of clients, from global organizations to organizations here in North America. Really, I think the constants is, how do we do things differently each day, whether we're working around change or collaboration, leadership, or, as I said, entrepreneurship, which is a big focus right now, because I think, again, in the world today, there's just so much going on, and group and team coaching provides a pause for people to come together, to think together, and to really envision and articulate what is possible, what's next. So looking forward to sitting down with both of you today.
I love it. I'm really curious about, what you said, because it's kind of funny. At some point, someone's going to be listening to this conversation and not realize that the world was a different place before 2020. And I loved your example, because you were leading the trend before virtual was really a thing. You're going to your publisher and going, hey, this is really important, and I can see this. What were you seeing back in 2016, 2017 that kind of prompted the virtual conversations?
Well, it's even before that, and I talk about this in my first TED Talk called Virtual, Remote, and Hybrid. And I started out as a young leader in the early 1990s, connected with my teams across South America by long range radio. So I like to say, if people know MASH, which also dates us, MASH was an American army show, but it had these old box radios, and that's how we connected with our teams. I was leading teams throughout South America, and really learned. This is where I learned everything I'm still using today, almost 40 years later, in terms of how do we lead? How do we get the best of people? How do we create empowering environments, even if you're not physically there? because when we're not physically together, we have to really use influence. We have to empower others to do their best work, use coaching tools, right? This is why I found myself in the realm of coaching in 2002. So back to like 2016, 2017, at that point, we'd been working with not only coaches, but with organizations since 2004 in the whole virtual spectrum. So I graduated out of the old army boxes. I remember the day the internet came in and I was sitting in Georgetown, Guyana, capital of South America. And it was like, wow. And in those days, our emails were sent out from the country 1 hour every night. They sat on a server in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and then they went out to the rest of the world. But, this was so radically a big change, and it allowed us to do things differently in our work. So I have to take us back to the 90s, back to the advent of the internet. And it's interesting as we're talking about this, because I think we are also on another moment of incremental change, another one of those world pivot points with AI and how the world operates and how we as humans really are. And this is where I think group and team coaching is the hub. AI can never replace what we do in rooms, what we do physically, virtually with conversations together as human beings. We might have mixed conversations with AI. However, it's going to be different than what we do. So that's a little bit, you can hear the futurist in me, right? I've always been a few years ahead of the curve. And same thing with group coaching, team coaching. When I first started talking about group coaching to my coach trainers, right? I was like, this is great, but I'm a leader. I work with governments. I'm going to go be working with communities next week. Can I do this with people that's more than one person? And they were like, oh, that's not coaching. And I'm like, but I think we can find a way. I could see that these tools are just what the people I'm working with need. So there have been many years of boundary breaking for me. And I have, as a Canadian, I have sort of rocked the boat, which is atypical for us as Canadians. However, I'm glad that we are now in a moment where group coaching and team coaching is so widely embraced and being leveraged as a modality of coaching and of awareness and of action, in so many different spaces. So
if a coach would start thinking about team or group coaching, what are actually the benefits for group coaching or team coaching? Why should they do this? What would they, not only as a coach, but what would the clients get out of it?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And it's different, right? We need to really recognize that group coaching is different than team coaching. I know still we're getting lots of questions, so I'll give that quick high level overview. In group coaching, we're bringing together perhaps peer groups, right? Or people who are working across an organization. They typically have a common theme, a common interest, and they're learning with and from each other. So the benefit of that is we're expanding our horizons. We're expanding our perspectives. We get new insights. We get inspiration from the people around us. And a lot of coaches like it because it's very different than the one-on-one. A lot of clients like it because they're not on the hot seat, right? In a deep one-on-one, sometimes if that trust, if that connection is not there between a coach and client, the client might feel like, why is this person asking me so many questions? I'm not ready. The pace is too much. But in a group coaching, you can really step back, right? Like great masterful group coaches are really going to be able to read the room, to really draw on the uniqueness. Because I think a challenge for both coaching many, as we call it here at Potentials Realize, coaching groups and coaching teams, is everyone in the group is different. Look at how you're sitting, leaning in, and Steve's like sitting back. You're both taking in this conversation in different ways. So I think there's real power in that, right? As we look at complex change, we individually don't have all the solutions. And that's where we have to harness the capability of many. And that's truly how I came to coaching as a young leader, seeking out coaching as a tool for my toolkit to support my teams across a region of the world. And that's where team coaching comes in. So how do we build the capability of our teams? We have a common mission, a common mandate. We may be physically together, or like the teams that I used to lead, we might be across 10 countries. But I think as leaders, we want to be able to do our best work. And so as a team coach, we're really partnering with that entire team, not just the leader, to say, hey, where do you want to go? Where are you now? Where do you want to go? What's possible? And so, I like to say we've got to go back to the basics of coaching, right? Think about, for those that were around, early 90s, thinking about, the seminal books of this profession. Where are you now? Where do you want to go? And how do you get from A to B? Whether we're one-on-one, group or team, same sort of bit. So I'm talking a lot, I realize. Hope this is what
Well,
you're looking for.
yeah, it's it's interesting that you say, because it's also what I've always seen from A to B and how do you get there. And it's the how because a consultant does the same. You're here, you want to go there. It's the way that you help the people to get there that makes
Yeah.
it different.
It's different. And who owns the process, right? Like, I think this is the really interesting nuance when we move from one-on-one coaching, where the coach and client have that shared agenda, but it's a pretty clear path. When we add multiple people in with group coaching, there's multiple pathways happening, right? And the coach is really there, possibly at the 50,000-foot view, really helping each individual notice their own path, but also learn with each other. How does my pathway connect with yours? It's a lot of like building roadways and pathways. So it's interesting because in 2020, my first podcast was called Remote Pathways. People were like, why do you call it this? And it's like, it was so influenced by the work that I've always done with groups, because part of our group work is not just about where are you going to go, but like, how is what you're bringing today being impacted by the conversations from what you hear with your peers? And that's a very rich area. So we never really know, like no coach ever knows where we're going to go. But as we have more people in the room, um, it's even more important for us as coaches to have that ability to really hold the space and to be comfortable in not knowing at nth degrees.
If
Absolutely.
we look at team coaching, which because I've done a lot of train the trainer, so like more as a consultant before, like train the trainers to train the leaders so that they can do the training with their team.
Yes.
Is that something that you do a lot, and is that something recommended to do, or would you
Mm.
just
So it's a great question. 10 years ago, I was doing a lot of coach the coach, as I like to say it, right? Not train the trainer, but
yeah.
coach the coach, and build that coaching capability in organizations. I think it's just a function of where my work is right now. I'm not doing as much of that, but actually got a Prism Award. My client and I got a Prism Award for the work that we were doing in healthcare. And it was really important, like most organizations, to build that capability. I think a foundation for great group and team coaching is how do we build some sort of level of coaching skills in the people that we're working with. And my sort of stance on this, and this is my latest book series called Reconnecting Workspaces, which the first book in the series came out in 2021. It really has this whole, I guess, paradigm shift, we can't just build leaders, we have to build everyone. We really have to equip people in every role. And we're seeing that now with organizations getting flatter, middle managers, being cut, especially in late 2024. And so what does that mean? Like, that means we've got to move to team-based organizations. And in a team-based organization, everyone has to have skills and capability. So I think whether it's train the trainer, coach the coach, probably going to be more relevant in 2025 than it has been in years go by, because of the change that's happening, not in every organization, but I think some organizations and industries are going through some pretty radical change, and more left to be seen as we go.
Yeah. I'm aligned with where you're looking to. I did some research on leadership a few years back as part of my doctorate, and one of the things that stood out for me was too often leaders are sort of outside of the team by definition. Historically, you had the leader that gave the direction, and the team went and did the work. And as you're saying, as layers are coming out, as things are getting more complex, as we need to be more agile and responsive, the whole leaders being part of the team, but actually that points to where you spoke to, which is the relational connection, the conversation. And one of the things that I'm seeing is there's so much power in conversation. Not what was your weekend or what sporting team do you think is going to win, but actually to socialize learning.
Mm-hmm.
And, in that group setting where leaders are facilitating conversations that they're participating in around a learning topic. And to me, the brilliance of that is not the conveyance of information. Let me tell you, these are the bullet points that you need to know. But let's discuss, let's chew on it, let's see what it means for us. How do we apply it? Where do we do it? I have a different perspective. Well, cool. Like, what are you seeing? There's something about that relational co-creative process that as coaches, we often do, hopefully. But that feels so important for leaders as we look forwards in the workplace.
I so agree. And that's where I came in as a young leader. It was like we as a team were facing these insurmountable challenges. We worked on the edge of post-disaster, right? So think about some of the things that have been happening in recent months. How do you help people rebuild entire nations? As a leader, it wasn't about me. It wasn't even about us as a team. It was about how do we show up and serve. And so when we're in that complex change and that mindset of we need to create every moment as we go with the people around us that we haven't even met yet, it is a very, very different stance on leadership. And, many people over the last 20 years have probably heard me speak and have not connected with me before because I was talking to a different paradigm. But if we're really looking to affect change in the world of change right now, we've got to do things differently and we've got to equip everyone, which is a pretty, like, again, back to that word radical revolutionary. It's a pretty revolutionary stance. And it's been interesting, certainly over the last 5 years, to see this tug of war that has been showing up in the landscape of remote. Oh, let's not let people work remote. We've got to bring them back to the office. But, trust levels are at their lowest. People are like, I'm not ready to work. And so that's a really hard context for coaches to step in. And the question is coaching even, being utilized in those cultures as well? Because to me, coaching is about empowerment. It's about helping people thrive. It's not about the carrot and stick of like, you've got to do this. And so it'll be an interesting few years, I think, as we navigate forward, because the economic powers in many spaces are really wanting to revert to different ways that maybe the flourishing ways have been in recent years. So
You
So
mentioned, go ahead.
as you look forward, 2025, you've kind of alluded to something like, what are you seeing is shifting, is emerging?
yeah, well, I see shift and I see emergence almost on two things. I see a lot of reactivity, which for someone like me, I've always been about how do we, even in the times of chaos, become proactive. And I do feel that our work as coaches is even more important to help people pause, connect with self, connect with others, connect with vision. Um, because in times of change, a lot can be changing. And this is where we need the pause even more. I think the other thing, like, we've been in years now in some spaces of people feeling like they've had to work remote, but they've been again talked at. It's not like this is a space where you can create, you can be really moving in. My work as an author and as a creative, as an experiential educator is about dialing that back up. So I've been working a lot on some of our products, card decks, dice sets, really things that people can either touch or engage with to start to activate new doorways of insight. And I think that is where I see a lot of joy, a lot of fun, a lot of smiles and laughter coming out, even in contexts where it's very heavy. Like, I think, again, we don't want to oversimplify the complexity of the world and the changes that people are going through. But I think there can be a place of like, let's enjoy this moment. Let's enjoy this moment together, because it may be the only time that we are together in this. And that's been very interesting to reflect on how, again, my career, it's sort of full circle. My boss in my last role used to call me up and she'd be like, Jen, guess what? We need you to jump on a plane and come and work with this group of 200 people. And it was like, I loved that work, right? I was a facilitator and I loved it when I didn't have to just be a leader and be a project manager. And as a coach, I get to do this all the time. So as my world also has been changing, I've had a lot of family responsibilities the last few years. My dad passed away a few months ago, and now I can get back on the road. So it's really interesting to be able to do that and engage with that, because I think as much as virtual is wonderful, I think if we can connect in person for these like often high impact moments, those are also really, really precious. And then we use the virtual to keep the conversation going, as we do with coaching, because coaching's never a one-off. It's a series of conversations. So that's what I'm excited about on a personal level. I think on a societal level, lots of change. I'm in Canada, lots of change on the go. We'll see where the world takes us. But I think there's again, I think we're coming out of the winter. I hope we're past the dark of winter here. And as we step into a new year, I think we're often quite hopeful that the dawn will break and things will be good. We'll see.
Absolutely.
How does the future look for Jennifer?
Well, we celebrated 20 years, right? This is like the 20th year of the business. So I've really been thinking a lot since that watermark almost 10 months ago, 9 months ago, like what does our next 10 years look like? And I think what's become a lot clearer for me and for the business, and I'm still very much the business as much as just Jen Britton. We've really spent a lot of time these last couple of years solidifying our pathway to the ACTC, the Advanced Credential and Team Coaching. I was very involved behind the scenes with that, along with many others around the world. And I'm seeing now people going through the learning process. Supervision, I think, is a really important piece. I tend to do even more supervision than I used to. And then these experiential products. And I'm doing that in a way where I'm also like, I always have thought about the generations. How do I build the next generation of coaches? And so as I think about people like Steve, I love it when people show the books, because it's like that whole body of work has really become part of people's fabric of the way they coach, of how they show up with groups and teams. So that's been a big part of my legacy. Then, the whole EVC, the effective virtual conversations, which went beyond the world of coaching. Like I think probably 20,000 people I talked to in 1 year, and they weren't just coaches. So my work is also spanning way beyond the borders of our profession. And the interesting sort of piece that's come back into my reality over this last 15 months is our connection again back to the Caribbean. And I am not sure where life is going to take me, but I do feel that there is a next something that will open up, because the business is getting to a space where it's not just me. It's got a system where the business can thrive even without me being behind the driver's seat. And so the business will keep on going. I think what I am interested in is what is the next universal adventure that comes my way. I think there's something on the horizon, and I'm not seeing it yet, but I'm sure it's there. So
hey, 20 years, congratulations. Like, you see all the stats about businesses generally and how many aren't making it to 3 and 5 years. So firstly, congratulations and well done.
Thank
And
you.
I'm guessing you had to learn a whole handful of lessons. Some were probably easier to learn than others. Others, the universe forced you to kind of learn until you got it. What are some of those things that you had to learn as you've been growing your business over the last 20 years?
Well, I have to thank my dad. My dad was an entrepreneur, and we always joked, like, I think there's something in the Britain DNA of being like an entrepreneur. And it's not for everyone, but I really, when I left my work, and I left my work because I lost vision in one of my eyes. That's why I've been so passionate about virtual. So I can navigate fine in the context I live within now. But as you can imagine, in post-disaster work, my vision was not good enough. It would have put other people at risk. And so, I had about a year to make the transition to this business. And so I did a lot of thinking. I had a lot of international flights between South America and Europe, where my bosses were based. And I remember coming off one flight, and I called my mom and I said, I think I could call my company Potentials Realized. And she's like, oh, that's such a good name. And why I offer this up is because you just never really know. I was like, and then I was like, I don't know whether I like this about a year into the business. People like, I really like this. Teams were like, we really like this because we're realizing our potentials. We never know what is going to catch root. Like I think about how effective group coaching came to be. I was speaking at a conference about group and team coaching, and this man came up from the audience and was like, I really enjoyed your presentation. You had us up, you had us moving, you had us in conversation. Um, I'm just curious. I wonder if you'd ever write a book on this topic. And I was like, wow, well, I have never thought about that. He's like, why don't we meet up a little bit later today? And it turns out he was an executive editor. And he's like, I think this might have some really interesting space in the world. Here's the proposal process. Why don't we talk about it? So that was, let's call that fall of 1 year, 12, 15 months later, out came effective virtual conversation, effective group coaching in 2009. And so you just don't know. Like, I think there's always moments in our business where we don't know. And if we're too tied to something, we may not see the opportunities. Because I might have thought, oh my gosh, how am I going to write a book? How am I going to do that? Well, at that point, I'd been training coaches since 2006 every month, effective group coaching essentials. That program is still running 19 years later. And so I think as an entrepreneur, I think what I realize now, because I cut my teeth in group coaching with entrepreneurs, I coached for several years, just women entrepreneurs who were new to Canada, entrepreneurs who were selling their businesses. People were excited in around 2006 and 7 here in Canada about how could you scale coaching to entrepreneurs. And so I was on TV. I was doing a lot of really interesting things that I never would have imagined in a business, but it taught me you've got to try it out in the long run. So as I've grown different legs of business, right? We're known for team development. We're known for group coaching. We're known for entrepreneurship. These are a lot of things. We're known for our creative tools. And there's always a consistent action. So 2 of my books that came out just before the pandemic, Plan, Do, Track, Coaching Business Builder, is really grounded in this notion of daily steps and consistent action creates momentum. And one thing that I've been excited about this year is I brought back one of my favorite programs that was birthed in the pandemic. It was called the 21 for 21. It was 21 minutes of virtual co-working every day for 21 days. Didn't do it for a few years, but I brought it back this month, 25 for 25. People are loving it. We come together Monday through Thursday evenings. We're only doing it for 25 days. We just wrapped up day 5. But, I think there's something in the power of consistent action. And we're seeing that, now we have James Clear's work to build on. But I think for certainly my legacy, my next legacy, it's not only conversation, but it's like, how do we thrive through change? And how do we feel that we have some level of control through these small steps on a regular basis, especially as an entrepreneur, because we don't know. We just don't know as entrepreneurs what is gonna catch root. And I think we just have to keep going. And I've always had, I've been blessed in some respects to have the pressure that many people know. My son was born a year into this business. My husband was still on a visitor's visa to Canada. He wasn't even a citizen yet. He didn't work. So if like I had to support this family, like many people, like I was the primary bread earner. I still am the primary bread earner years later. And that caused some pressure and pressure to try it out, right? Like, and I think this is what I see with a lot of great coaches. They sort of do something, but they don't really like give it all. It's like, oh, they let whatever get in the way. And so I think part of my role with entrepreneurs is really like, how do we hold that vision and how do we keep going no matter what? Because our visions will manifest or will come to be in some way. It may not be in the timeline we think, it may not be in the exact way that we think, but if you really sit down with entrepreneurs who have gotten over those initial edges, the vision is often what has fueled the entire journey. And I think that's certainly something that I've held true and will continue to hold true, hopefully for at least another decade. Who knows? But I think there's, we've been able to pivot and continue to build in a lot of challenging situations. And so we're going to just keep doing what we do because it makes a difference in people's lives.
So so what are some tips that you can give to coaches or people that are going to do a group coaching or team coaching?
Mm.
What are some tips that you
Mhm.
can give them sort of very quickly that they can say, hey, like a small checklist?
Yeah, great question. So let's go to group coaching first, right? Like I think group coaching is really what do people want and helping people in your group connect not only with you but with each other and seeing how their learning together can be more than just if they've done it on their own. For both group and team coaching, I think the setup to this work is important. I get it really into big on process because I still think there are many spaces where people don't know what coaching really is. They think they're part of an organization. It's like we're going to do group coaching. They think they're coming to a workshop, right? No, that you're driving the bus. This is your journey. You get to determine where you're going. And so I think the pre set up and back to connectivity, connection is at the heart of group and team coaching. For years, like for 15 years before I became a coach, I was a process facilitator. And so, one of the other big questions is, well, what's the difference? There's a really big difference. You need to have great facilitation skills to be a great group or team coach, but there's even more landscape. And I think, for group and team coaches, how are you building that trust? How are you also building your range? How are you taking time to pause and look at what's working, what's not, and where you as a coach are also getting in the way of things.
Mm.
I think as we scale to team coaching, right, we may be co-coaching, so working with other partners, being able to lean into that. And I think that's a really important part of team coaching is we're showing up as a coaching partnership, often illustrating like what happens when one person sort of takes it off to a different tangent, or what happens if we're not quite clear what's going on. And so I think there's, that's a big piece that we don't talk about a lot in the landscape of team coaching. I think the last few years have been helping teams or helping coaches understand what is team coaching. But I think we're now getting to the stage where we can look at coaching presence, co-coaching. We've been in our pathway program to the ACTC. Those are the advanced courses that I've really loved not only building out like 3-4 years ago, but now seeing people move through it and seeing coaches go, I now understand why you've been so passionate about talking about these group and team coaching superpowers, Jen, because like I sort of used to show up like this, but now I've been able to access even more range as a coach. And I think that's a really important piece. We've got to keep growing and learning as coaches. It doesn't end with that initial coach training. We've got to be really examining ourselves and learning with and learning from our clients, and they're going to signal what we need. So I hope those are some practical tips. Again, like don't overcomplicate it
Yeah.
too. In saying we need to keep learning, it doesn't mean we need to keep adding. We actually need to distill down to the core in a lot of the work.
I think one thing that you mentioned, and Steve and myself see this as well, don't do it alone sometimes because like co-coaching, it's sometimes like we say we have that play where we do, but someone he can go that way, I can go that way. We fill each other in, and as as because a lot of coaches say, yeah, I am, and let me do it. No, if you do it with different coaches, it's like if one question comes and you can't, you just got quickly
Yeah,
answer,
what would you
or
say?
just, yeah, exactly. So it helps you to make maybe it makes also the entry level into group and team coaching lower because you
Mhm.
are not alone, and it's meant like, okay, I'm not alone. I don't have to support the whole thing. Is that?
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think with group and team coaching too, it's not all reliant on the coach. Like group coaching, it's about the group.
Yeah.
We've got to step back. We've got to let the oxygen of conversation really, lean in, and your group process is going to be totally influenced by who's in the room. Team coaching, yeah, who am I working with? Who is this other partner? And it used to always be it was another external, but you may find that you're now working with an internal as an
Mm.
external. So that's a whole other dance as well. And I think it's very I've always had like on our evaluation feedback from teams like we really liked how you worked with your partner, right? That is important because hopefully we're different, right? There's a lot of science behind this, and we need to be as diverse, hopefully, as the teams and the groups are that we are working with. Because if we're both bringing the same thing, we've now created a lot of blind spots, a lot of gaps. And I think I want to put that out as, who are you in connection with in the coaching world or in organizations? Who could be co-leading with you?
Yeah.
And, leading in that instance is not about knowing, as we talked about early in this. It's about really like the journey of inquiry and what's next, where are we going?
I actually think that co-leadership is a way that we can exemplify that. As an individual leader, I kind of need to know everything, and to not know stuff is a real threat. And I've got to carry this, and I've got to carry that, and I've got to carry this. And I can be so focused on the task and the structure of what we're doing that I'm missing a lot of the relational things that are emerging. And yet, to be able to give people an example of hopefully a positive relational dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
In many cases, in many organizations, that's the first time that they've seen two leaders positively supporting each other without one having to be the big boss.
Yeah, through difference, right? Through
Absolutely.
difference in a way that is constructive and respectful. Yeah.
Yeah, and that at a dyad level or a pair level is in many ways what we're wanting more of across the team, where the differences are strengths and resources that make all of us stronger. They're not points of conflict or competition.
Yeah. And, to that, with so many changes happening around the world, I think, how do we keep the flame of collaborative dialogue, of discourse, respectful discourse, across differences? Because I don't, we're not seeing a lot of that in our context, even here as Canadians sometimes. And, civility is such a key skill, I think, of my work at the global arena. And that's where I feel like I may get called back in to do work, right, on the more global range, because I think to navigate many of the challenges that we are facing as a human species, and I talk about climate change. I, am trained as an environmentalist. That is what my work originally is in. But to really navigate this, we need to be together. We need to be able to learn with and from the different discourse rather than just shutting it down and saying, no, not going to do it. So how do we open those borders? How do we open those windows of discussion and dialogue? And I think the co-leading is a huge part of that. How do we also, like where we started today was the team-based environments, right? That is a different model of leadership. How do we empower others to navigate and to move forward? So I think the people listening to today's episode, it's going to be an interesting one. It might be a little different than what, people have heard from me, where it's like, okay, if you want to open up and do a, opener or closer. But I think these are all really important. It's about the context in which we're coaching right now, which always has had an influence on the way conversations unfold.
It also speaks to something you said very early on. There's technology, there's this AI boom that's happening, that's integrating. The UK government recently announced they're looking at bringing AI to increase efficiency, and there's all of this to jobs, and there's all of this stuff that's going on and this uncertainty. And yet, in many ways, the essence of, at least what I'm hearing you speak to, is the power of humanity. And as humans, as we come together, that's not something that we can outsource to technology.
Now, I was saying recently on our podcast, one of my favorite moments this past fall, when things were really dark and my dad had just passed away, we went to see Lenny Kravitz, who was, I always say he's the soundtrack to my life, but one of his new songs is called Human. And it's like, that's become very much like just almost like my theme song at the moment. Because what's interesting, right, to research and where we may be going, the World Economic Forum has just released their, skills anticipated for 2030. What's high on the list? Creativity. That's where, like, next month from Barbados, I'm doing a creativity workshop for coaches. What else is on there, right? It's about creative thinking as well. And I think about the work that my clients are wanting, like, Jen, come and help us with not strategic planning, but strategic thinking. How are we thinking in those systems way? How are we looking in a future focused manner. And, I think there will be probably a moment of the sentience that we're hearing about faster than we can imagine. So how do we work with technology? This has always been like 10 years ago in doing effective virtual conversations. I was like, oh, we can't do that. Well, we have done that, right? So what's the next layer, and how do we actually take the best of us forward? So I think as coaches, the heart of our work is conversation. It is about questions, it's about listening, it's about activating awareness and insight. And those are going to be skills that are needed by everyone more than ever.
That's brilliant.
Well, I do have so many more questions, but I think we got nearly to the top of the hour or the end of the podcast. So, is there anything else, Jennifer, that you very quickly would like to share with the people listening? Like maybe a last thought that keep them
Last thought.
going thinking.
I feel like I need to come back and really talk about group or team coaching
Yes.
next time.
Well,
We got
let's
really
do
into
this.
the future today. No, I think it's just, as I always say to coaches, it's like, really find what you love to do, find the clients that you love to work with. The rest will unfold. Build in time to connect with good people, and, build in the pause so that you can also appreciate the journey as you go. I've really appreciated sitting down with both of you today. We've I don't know how we've done it, but we've gone from like entrepreneurship to the future to creative tools. I'm really excited to have you both at the head of your organization, because I think your organization has also really been an important resource for coaches. I've enjoyed writing for probably more than a decade now and look forward to continuing to be a contributor as well.
Absolutely. We love having you. Jen, as we come to finish, for those, which is pretty much everyone, that would love to learn more about your work, your worldview, what's going on, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
I think it's like go to our website, groupcoachingessentials.ca, right? The main company is Potentials Realized, but groupcoachingessentials.ca. On social, I come up in many different formats, but probably Coaching Biz Builder is the best one to connect around on Instagram. And then, of course, we have the Coaching Many podcast for those that like to listen about all things group and team coaching. So if you really want to take a deep dive, head on over to the Coaching Many podcast. But it's been a pleasure to be with all of you today, and hope that we get to sit down again in the future.
We hope to. Thank you very much for your time, Jennifer, and let's speak soon.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thanks for tuning in to The Coaching Edge. Until next time, keep coaching and keep growing.